The twin suns of Prime burned red over the great city of Telrian, the shining capital of the Terran Dominion. Tall silver towers rose from the rocky ground like the spines of a giant beast, their tips glowing with energy fields that shimmered in the hot wind. From her high balcony, Princess Karena Turen watched the ships in the sky, dark, massive warships floating on thruster light. They had been the pride of her people once. Now they were symbols of a fading empire. The Vasharan plague had spread faster than any weapon. It didn't kill through battle. It erased life from the inside, breaking DNA, changing blood, leaving bodies cold and empty. The plague didn't care about strength, rank, or will. And for the first time in her proud life, Karena saw fear in her people's eyes. Below her, scientists and soldiers worked side by side, their armor painted with the sigil of a dying world. And soon humans would walk among them. The thought burned like acid. She turned sharply when the door behind her opened. "Your Highness," said General Vakar, bowing low. His gray skin bore the lines of battle, his right eye replaced by a glowing cyber lens. "The Earth delegation has entered orbit. They request landing permission." Karena's sharp voice echoed through the chamber. "Granted. But they are not to wander the capital. Keep them contained to the diplomatic quarter." "As you command." When he left, Karena's fists clenched at her sides. Her golden armor plates shifted slightly, reflecting the light from the suns. She whispered under her breath, "To think we must depend on them, frail creatures from a dirt world." Her aide, a young Terran woman named Sia, hesitated before speaking. "The scientists say human DNA might resist the plague, my lady. Their help could save our future." Karena's gaze hardened. "If survival demands surrendering our pride, then perhaps we are not meant to survive." But even as she said it, her voice trembled. Arrival of the humans. The next day, the human delegation arrived. Their shuttle descended like a comet through the crimson sky, its sleek black hull marked with the United Earth Federation emblem. Soldiers lined the landing platform, their energy rifles gleaming. Karena stood waiting, wearing ceremonial armor of blue and gold, her silver hair tied back, her expression carved from stone. The shuttle's ramp lowered with a hiss of steam. Out stepped the human commander. He was tall, taller than most Terran men, broad-shouldered. His uniform simple but clean. His name was Commander Elias Ward. A faint scar crossed his cheek, a mark of battle rather than beauty. He walked with quiet confidence, not arrogance. Karena's eyes narrowed. So this is the man they send to negotiate the breeding pact. He approached, flanked by two scientists. When he reached her, he didn't bow. He didn't kneel. He simply stopped and extended his hand. "Commander Elias Ward of Earth," he said calmly. "Thank you for welcoming us to your world, Princess." The crowd around them murmured in shock. Among the Terran, to touch royalty was forbidden. Karena looked down at his hand, then up at his steady blue eyes. There was no mockery there, only respect and determination. She didn't take his hand. "You stand before the heir of the Terran Dominion," she said coolly. "You will show proper reverence." Elias lowered his hand slowly. "Reverence comes in many forms, Princess. On Earth we meet as equals before we fight for life together." The silence that followed was sharp as a blade. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Karena turned away. "You will learn our customs before you speak of equality, Commander. Follow General Vakar to the council chamber." As he passed her, Elias said quietly, "With respect, Your Highness, our worlds die the same way. Pride won't save either of us." Her eyes widened slightly, but she said nothing. The council debate. The council chamber glowed with silver light. Holographic maps showed spreading red zones, areas lost to the plague. Terran elders and human scientists argued over data and ethics, their voices overlapping. At the center, Karena sat upon her throne, watching silently. Elias stood across the room, hands clasped behind his back. He listened more than he spoke, but when he did, the room fell quiet. "The genetic bridge," he said firmly, "isn't about domination or surrender. It's survival. Human and Terran DNA are remarkably compatible. Together we can engineer resistance," an elder hissed. "You speak of mixing our blood like animals in a pen." Elias met the elder's glare. "Animals don't sacrifice themselves for others. Humans do, so do Terran. You call this dishonor, I call it courage." Karena's eyes flickered toward him. "Courage? Her people had always believed strength came from power, not sacrifice. Yet this human, this soldier, spoke with calm conviction that unsettled her. When the meeting ended, Karena dismissed everyone but Elias. "You speak boldly, Commander," she said, standing. "Too boldly. I speak plainly," he replied. "Your people have pride. My people have persistence. Together, maybe we survive." She studied him for a long moment. "Do you not fear contamination? Being part of something? Alien?" He smiled faintly. "I've been a soldier for 20 years, Princess. I've seen monsters and miracles. You're neither." She didn't know if that was an insult or the first honest compliment she'd ever received from a human. Behind closed doors. Later that night, Karena returned to her private quarters. The silver moonlight from Vashara's twin moons cast pale light on her armor as she removed it. Piece by piece. Her mind replayed the day. The scar on his cheek. The way he didn't flinch before her counsel. The strange calm in his eyes. Humans were supposed to be impulsive, emotional, weak. Yet this one seemed grounded. Sia entered quietly. "You've been quiet, my lady. The scientists are ready to begin compatibility studies." Karena nodded. "Assign another volunteer." "I will not participate," Sia hesitated. "But the Genetic Council specifically requested your involvement. As the heir, your DNA holds the strongest Tyren lineage." Karena turned sharply. I said no, but Sia didn't move. "If I may, Your Highness, the humans came a long way to help us. The commander risked much to bring their samples through the quarantine zones. He's already lost half his crew." Karena froze. "He what?" Sia lowered her head. 3 humans died before they reached Vashara. The commander carried the samples himself through the infected zone. He refused to abandon the mission. For the first time in months, Karena felt something stir in her chest, something she couldn't name. "Leave me," she said softly. When Sia left, Karena looked out the window again. In the distance, she saw the faint lights of the human camp outside the capital walls. A single ship light blinked steadily in the dark. The soldier's oath at the human base. Elias sat alone in the med tent, checking over data on his hollow slate. His burns from an earlier mission still itched beneath his uniform. Around him, his small team rested, scientists, medics, engineers, all exhausted. Dr. Han, his chief biologist, approached. "You know the princess hates us," Elias chuckled softly. "She has reason to. We're strangers with needles and theories. Still, her DNA is key. Without her, the hybrid model fails." Elias leaned back, staring at the hologram of Tyren DNA strands twisting like silver ribbons. "She'll come around. She's strong. Too strong to let pride kill her people." Han raised an eyebrow. "You sound confident." "I'm a soldier," Elias said quietly. "When everything burns, you learn to believe in the impossible." Outside, the desert wind howled against the tent. Somewhere beyond the horizon, Vashara's twin suns sank below the crimson dunes. The princess watches that night. Karena couldn't sleep. She walked through the silent halls of her palace until she reached the balcony again. From there, she could see the distant lights of the human camp. For the first time, she wondered what they were doing, if they slept, if they feared, if they missed their home. She thought of the commander's eyes, clear, steady, unafraid. "Why are you so calm?" She whispered to the stars. "Why don't you tremble like the others?" A gust of wind swept through her hair. Below, the city hummed with quiet energy. Morning light touched the towers of Telrian. The twin suns rose above the horizon like molten eyes, washing the city in gold and crimson. Inside the palace, the council chamber was alive with tension. Princess Karena stood at the end of a long crystal table. Around her, advisors whispered in sharp tones. Human scientists waited on the other side, silent but determined. At the head of the table, Commander Elias Ward watched the room with calm focus. His hands rested behind his back, his uniform neat despite the long nights of work. The topic was simple, but unbearable to Karena. The pairing program. A plan meant to mix human and Tyren genes to find a cure for the Vasharan plague. And the council had chosen her to lead it. Karena's voice cut through the noise like a blade. "This proposal is unacceptable. My bloodline is not an experiment." General Vakar shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, Your Highness, the scientists believe your DNA gives the best chance of success." "Then let another royal volunteer," she snapped. Elias finally spoke, his tone calm but firm. "Princess, this isn't about rank. It's about time. We've lost 3 colonies this month. If we wait longer, there'll be no one left to argue. Her eyes met his. You speak as if you understand the cost of bloodlines, Commander. I've seen the cost of extinction, he said quietly. It's much higher. The room fell silent. The princess wanted to argue, but there was something in his voice, a memory, maybe pain, that made her hesitate. After a long pause, she said coldly, Fine. I will participate. But only under one condition. Elias nodded. Name it. You will work with me directly. I do not trust others with this, the council murmured in surprise. Elias only gave a small nod. Then we start tomorrow. The laboratory. The lab lay deep beneath the palace, built from shining white metal and glass. Holographic lights floated over consoles, displaying genetic codes like glowing rivers. Karena entered, her armor replaced by a simple silver robe. She looked around the human devices with open suspicion. Elias was already there, standing beside a table filled with scanners and vials. He smiled politely. Morning, Princess, she ignored the greeting. Let's begin. He showed her the machines one by one, explaining their purpose. He spoke in simple terms, careful not to sound like a teacher. Karena listened silently, her expression unreadable. Finally, he held up a small glass tube with faint blue liquid. This is the stabilizer. It protects DNA during cross-matching. Without it, the cells reject each other. She frowned slightly. You speak of merging our kinds as if it were easy. He gave a short laugh. It isn't. Every species we've tried has failed. But humans, we're good at failing until we succeed. His words puzzled her. You take pride in failure? In learning from it, he replied simply. That's how we survive. For the first time, she felt a hint of curiosity.
Humans did not think like her people.
The Terran believed in perfection. Humans seemed to grow stronger from mistakes. The first test began with blood samples. Karena sat rigidly as a human medic prepared the injector. The needle glimmered under white light. She didn't like being touched, especially by another species. But when the medic hesitated, Elias stepped forward. Allow me, he said. She almost protested, but stopped. His movements were steady, professional. The injector hissed softly against her arm. A drop of silver blood slid into the tube. Elias handed it to the medic and nodded. Thank you, Princess. She studied his face, searching for mockery, but found none. Only quiet respect. When it was his turn, Karena noticed the scar on his hand. Fresh, still healing from the plasma burns he had suffered earlier. Yet he didn't flinch as the needle pierced his skin. Your body endures much, she said before she realized she was speaking. He smiled faintly. That's the job. Tension days passed. The two worked together in the lab for hours, an uneasy silence growing between them. Sometimes they spoke of science, sometimes of their worlds, but mostly they worked. Karena kept her distance, but she couldn't ignore his focus. He rarely rested, always checking data, always analyzing. He carried the same steady calm she had seen on the landing platform. One evening, she found him asleep at his desk, head resting on his arms. The data screen still glowed around him. For a long moment, she simply watched. The great human soldier looked fragile, but there was something peaceful about him, as if exhaustion had softened the steel in him. She turned to leave, but stopped when she saw the photograph beside his tablet. A small picture, half torn, 2 smiling faces, a woman and a little boy. Karena blinked. Your family? Elias stirred, waking slowly. Used to be, he said softly. My wife and son. They didn't survive the outbreak on Mars colony. Karena froze. I didn't know. I don't tell many people, he said with a tired smile. But it's why I'm here. If we can stop this plague, maybe no one else has to lose everything. She looked away quickly, hiding her expression. You fight not for glory, but for others, he shrugged. That's what soldiers are for. For the first time, the word soldier didn't sound cold to her. Sabotage. 2 nights later, the base alarm screamed through the corridors. Red lights flashed. Karena woke to the sound of explosions from the lower levels. Sia burst into her room, breathless. Terrorist, my lady! A Terran faction breached the lab. They call the Alliance a disgrace. Karena grabbed her armor and ran. By the time she reached the lower levels, smoke filled the air. Fire alarms hissed as security drones hovered, firing stun beams. In the chaos, she saw Elias, burned sleeve, face smeared with soot, carrying an injured scientist toward safety. Commander, she shouted. He turned, relief flashing across his face. Princess! The central lab, if the stabilizer tanks rupture, we lose everything. Without hesitation, she followed him. Together, they raced into the main chamber where a broken console sparked wildly. Flames licked the floor. Karenna tried to reach the emergency seal. A beam collapsed, blocking her path. Elias didn't hesitate. He threw himself against it, straining to lift the metal long enough for her to crawl through. "You'll be crushed," she yelled. "Move!" He shouted back. She dove under. The beam crashed behind her, pinning his arm. He cried out but didn't stop working to stabilize the system with his free hand. Karenna pulled with all her strength, metal grinding against stone. "You can't fight it alone." Elias gritted his teeth. "Then help me fight." Together, they pushed the console into position, locking it in place just before the stabilizer tanks exploded. A wave of blue light washed over them, then silence. For a long moment, neither spoke. Then Karenna knelt beside him. His arm was bleeding, his skin burned from the heat. "Why?" she whispered. "Why risk yourself for me?" He looked at her, breathing heavily. "Because no one gets left behind. Not in my command." Her throat tightened. For the first time, she saw the truth behind his calm. It wasn't arrogance. It was discipline, duty, honor. The aftermath hours later, after the medics treated the wounded, Karenna sat beside Elias's recovery bed. His arm was wrapped in silver bandages, his eyes half closed but alert. "You should rest," she said softly. He smiled weakly. "Can't, too much to do." "You're impossible." "So they tell me." She shook her head, almost smiling. "You saved me." He opened one eye. "You saved the data. We're even." They sat in silence for a moment. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of medical machines. Finally, Karenna said, "Perhaps I was wrong about your kind." He raised an eyebrow. "Oh? I thought humans were fragile, reckless, but maybe you're simply unbreakable." He laughed quietly, then winced from pain. "We break plenty, Princess. We just get up again." Understanding days later, the lab was rebuilt. Security doubled. The hybrid samples had survived, and tests showed early signs of resistance against the plague. It was a small success, but enough to give hope. Karenna found herself looking forward to the lab hours, though she never admitted it aloud. She still held her pride, but it was changing shape, becoming something quieter, humbler. Elias noticed the change too. Her tone softened, her questions grew thoughtful. Sometimes they even shared small smiles when the experiments went well. One afternoon, as they analyzed results, Karenna said suddenly, "Commander, why do humans always risk so much for others, even those who are not their own?" He paused, then answered simply, "Because once you've lost everything, you understand how much every life is worth." She looked at him in silence. That simple truth felt heavier than any speech her elders had given. For the first time, she didn't see him as a stranger. She saw him as someone carrying his own scars, someone not so different after all. A quiet moment. That night when their work ended, they walked together through the empty corridors. The air smelled faintly of ozone after the repairs. The city lights glittered beyond the windows. Karenna stopped beside a viewport, gazing at the stars. "When I was young," she said quietly, "I thought the Tren would rule the stars forever. Now I see how fragile even empires are." Elias stood beside her, hands in his pockets. "Empires fall. People endure." She looked at him. "You truly believe that?" "I have to," he said. "It's all we've got." For a long moment they stood in silence, watching the stars burn beyond the glass. Neither spoke of pride or politics. They simply watched, breathing the same air, standing on the edge of two worlds, slowly learning to trust each other. The days after the attack passed in uneasy calm. Repairs to the lab were finished, and the council had tightened security around the palace. Patrol drones flew above the towers, their red eyes sweeping across the silver rooftops of Telrian. But peace in the city did not mean peace in the heart. Princess Karenna had not been the same since that night. She often caught herself thinking about Commander Elias Ward, his burned arm, his calm voice, his strange courage that seemed to come from pain instead of pride. She tried to hide it. Tren royalty were not supposed to show curiosity about outsiders, yet every time she saw him walk into the lab, his uniform crisp and his steps firm despite his wounds, she felt something unfamiliar stirring inside her. It wasn't affection. Not yet, it was Respect morning in the lab hummed with energy. Holographic displays flickered as data scrolled across transparent screens. Karena stood beside Elias, watching the latest results from the hybrid DNA test. It's stable, Elias said, leaning closer to the screen. Human cell fusion is holding for 70 hours now. That's a record. Karena nodded, hiding her surprise. You make it sound simple, he smiled faintly. It's not simple. But neither is survival. She glanced at him. You always sound as if you've lived 100 lives. He chuckled softly. Feels like it some days. When their eyes met, Karena quickly looked away. She told herself it was only curiosity, scientific interest, nothing more. Yet her heart beat faster than it should have. The wound beneath the uniform later that day, Elias dropped a tool. He bent to pick it up, but the movement made him wince. Karena noticed his hand tremble slightly. Your injury still pains you? She asked. It's nothing, he said quickly. She frowned. You humans say that every time you're dying. He laughed under his breath. We say it because there's always something worse. Karena tilted her head. Worse than pain? Losing purpose, he replied quietly. Pain means you're still fighting. His words echoed in her mind long after he turned back to work. She realized she didn't understand this kind of strength, the kind that didn't come from power, but from endurance. A conversation at dusk that evening. When their shift ended, Karena followed Elias out to the outer terrace. The sun was setting, painting the sky in purple and orange light. Elias leaned against the railing, looking at the twin moons rising above the horizon. Karena joined him silently. For a while, neither spoke. The only sound was the wind brushing against their clothes. Finally, she said, You were a soldier before this mission. He nodded. Yes, Earth Defense Corps, 10 years. Why did you leave the battlefield? He sighed. Because war doesn't always solve what it breaks. I saw too many people die believing they were saving something, when they were just repeating the same mistakes. She turned to him, studying his face. And yet you came here to fight another kind of war. This one's worth it, he said softly. It's not about power or territory. It's about giving life a chance. She looked away toward the horizon. You sound like my father once did. Before the plague changed everything, what happened to him? Elias asked gently. He died leading the evacuation of the southern colonies, she said, her voice low. He believed the Terran could endure anything. He was wrong. Elias was silent for a moment, then said he wasn't wrong. You're still here. The words were simple, but they carried a warmth that pierced her armor more deeply than any insult ever could. The hidden record. The next morning, Karena arrived early to the lab. Elias wasn't there yet. She decided to review his research logs, only the public ones, she told herself. As she opened the files, she found something unexpected. A recording curious, she pressed play. Mission log, day 12, casualties 3. Cargo intact. We lost Dr. Miller during the landing. I carried the samples myself. The Terran don't trust us and I don't blame them. But I'll see this through. If this project fails, humanity fails with it. My son, if you were still alive, I hope you'd be proud of me. Karena froze. The last line made her chest tighten painfully. She closed the log quickly, feeling as if she had glimpsed something sacred. So that was his strength. Not pride, not duty, love. The memory of what he'd lost gave him purpose. She whispered softly to the empty room. You carry ghosts, human soldier. The confrontation later that day. The council summoned Karena and Elias. The Terran elders had reviewed the project's progress. Some were impressed, but others were not. They accused Karena of becoming too close to the humans, of letting emotion cloud her judgment. Elder Venar, a tall, severe figure with silver eyes, spoke sharply. The Dominion cannot rely on outsiders for salvation, he said. We are warriors, not beggars. Karena's voice rose. You call it begging to accept help? You call it strength to die alone? Elias tried to calm her. Princess, but Venar cut in, pointing toward Elias. And you, human. You poison her mind with weakness. The room tensed. Guards shifted uneasily. Elias straightened but did not argue. His silence spoke louder than words. Karena stood suddenly. Enough! If this human is weak, then why did he bleed for us? Why did he save my life when your soldiers ran? The chamber went still. Elder Venar's lips pressed thin. You defend him as if he were one of us. She looked directly at Elias, her voice soft but firm. Perhaps he is more Terran than any of us. Elias's eyes met hers, full of quiet gratitude. In that instant, something invisible but powerful passed between them, a bond forged not from blood but from shared purpose. The revelation, that night, Karenna couldn't rest. The argument in the council still burned in her mind. She walked to the training yard outside the palace, needing space to breathe. She found Elias there, practicing with a shock staff. His movements were fluid, controlled, every strike followed by a steady breath. She approached silently. "You train even after working all day?" He smiled without stopping. "Old habits. Helps me think." "Humans fight differently," she observed. He lowered the staff, wiping sweat from his brow. "We fight to end fights." Strange philosophy for a soldier. "Maybe," he said, leaning on the staff. "But I learned something. Being strong isn't about hurting others. It's about protecting what matters." Karenna folded her arms. "You speak as if you know pain better than anyone." He gave a sad smile. "I do, and I don't wish it on anyone." She watched him closely. "You lost your family." He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes, the plague reached Mars colony before we could contain it. I was off-world on duty. I came back to ashes." "I'm sorry," she said softly. He looked at her, surprised by the sincerity in her tone. "Thank you." She stepped closer. "You carry that pain like armor." He chuckled quietly. "Maybe, but armor can get heavy." For a moment, neither spoke. The desert wind whispered through the training yard. Karenna's eyes softened. "You are not what I expected, human. And you're not what I was warned about," he said. "They told me Terran royalty were cold as ice." She smiled faintly. "Maybe you're melting it." Elias froze, unsure if he'd heard her right. But the slight curve of her lips told him she wasn't angry. A shared scar the following day, the lab team confirmed the hybrid gene had reached 90% stability. Excitement spread among both humans and Terran scientists. For the first time, real hope filled the air. Elias leaned over the console. "If we can get full integration, we can start vaccine trials." Karenna nodded. "You've done well, Commander." He gave her a curious look. "We have done well, Princess." She smiled slightly. "So we have." Just then, the stabilizer core beeped, an overload warning. Before anyone could react, a burst of blue light erupted from the containment chamber. The blast knocked them both to the floor. When Karenna opened her eyes, she saw Elias shielding her with his body again. His back burned from the plasma flare. "Elias!" she cried, pushing him up. "You're hurt!" He grimaced. "It's fine." She tore part of her robe and pressed it to the burn. "You fool. You could have died." He looked at her with tired eyes. "Better me than you." Her hands trembled. "Why do you keep doing this?" "You risk your life again and again," he smiled weakly. "Because I made a promise to protect every life I can. That includes yours." Her voice softened. "Even when I treated you like an enemy?" "Especially then." Tears welled in her eyes before she could stop them. For the first time, she didn't hide them. "You are impossible, human," she whispered. He grinned faintly. "So I've been told." A new respect later that night, Karenna sat beside Elias as he rested in the medbay again. The soft hum of machines filled the air. She looked at his sleeping face. The man who had crossed galaxies to save strangers, who carried his pain like a shield but never used it as a weapon. For the first time, she truly saw him. Not as a soldier, not as a human, but as a soul stronger than most beings she had ever met. She reached out, hesitated, then lightly touched his uninjured hand. "Maybe," she whispered, "our worlds are not so different after all." Outside, beyond the medbay window, the stars of Vashara burned brighter than ever, like silent witnesses to the beginning of something greater than war or duty. The morning sky above Telrion burned red with strange light. It was not dawn. It was warning. Princess Karenna stood on the balcony of the medical tower, watching the alarm drones rise into the clouds. Their metallic voices echoed across the city. Unidentified ships detected. Eastern Quadrant lockdown initiated. She turned sharply. "What's happening?" A guard bowed his head. "Unknown fleet entering orbit, Princess." "They are not human, not Tyran. Their energy signatures are..." Unlike anything in our records, her blood ran cold. The universe had been quiet for years, too quiet. And now something new had arrived. The first strike inside the research facility, Commander Elias Ward was already preparing the defense grid. He stood beside the control console, his injured arm still wrapped in white cloth. Around him, human and T-Ren soldiers moved quickly, checking plasma rifles and drone links. "Shields up?" Elias asked. 60% power, sir," replied Lieutenant Nira, one of the T-Ren officers. "But the outer array isn't responding." "Then reroute it manually," Elias said. His voice stayed calm, but his eyes were sharp. "If those ships are hostile, we won't get a second chance." A tremor shook the floor. The lights flickered. Everyone looked up as a deep, rumbling sound filled the air, the unmistakable roar of orbital fire. The facility shuddered under the first blast. Alarms screamed. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Karena burst into the control room, her silver robes torn where debris had fallen. "Elias," she called. He turned at once, relief flashing across his face. "You shouldn't be here." "This is my project as much as yours," she shot back. "I won't hide while others die." Elias gave a faint, almost proud smile. "Then stay close. Uninvited guests." The next blast hit the eastern tower and a cloud of smoke rose outside the window. Through the smoke, shapes appeared, black ships sharp like blades descending through the atmosphere. "Those are not any known species," Nira said, her voice trembling. "They're hulls." "They're alive," Elias narrowed his eyes. "Organic metal. They're using living ships." "Living?" Karena repeated. "Who could build such things?" Before anyone could answer, the communication screen lit up. A distorted voice hissed through the static. "Tren, human, your alliance offends the stars. You meddle with life that is not yours to touch. Surrender your research or be erased." Elias stepped forward. "Identify yourself." "We are Vorlith, the true keepers of creation. You spread your corruption through blood and code. You will be cleansed." The transmission cut. Silence filled the room, heavy and cold. Then Elias said, "So much for negotiation. The defense begins." Elias moved fast. "Evacuate non-combatants to the lower vaults. Seal the medical wing and activate auto-defense turrets. No one leaves the core without my command." Karena hesitated. "What about the samples?" He looked at her, serious. "If they get their hands on that DNA, both our species are finished." She nodded. "Then we protect it." Moments later, the first wave hit. Alien warriors, tall, armored, and dark biometal, broke through the outer barrier, firing bolts of searing plasma. The walls shook with every impact. Elias took cover behind a fallen beam, returning fire with precise, controlled bursts. Karena stood behind a console, using the security system to overload nearby circuits. "Left corridor clear," she shouted. Elias sprinted forward, pulling a wounded T-Ren soldier to safety. "Stay with me," he barked. "No one dies here, you hear me?" The soldier nodded weakly, eyes wide with fear. Karena watched him, her heart tightening. Even under fire, Elias moved like a force of nature, calm, focused, unyielding. She understood now why humans called soldiers like him guardians. The inner hall, after 20 minutes of fighting, the main hall was in ruins. Fires burned along the walls. The smell of ozone and blood filled the air. Karena crouched beside Elias as he reloaded his weapon. "They're trying to reach the containment core," she said. "I know," he replied. "They want the hybrid serum," she frowned. "If they destroy it, they won't," Elias interrupted. "Not while I'm breathing." A loud crash shook the ground. The reinforced doors at the far end burst open, and a massive Vorlith warrior stepped through. Its armor pulsed like veins under skin, its eyes glowing red. It carried a weapon that looked part flesh, part machine. Elias raised his gun. "Everyone fall back." He fired, but the creature shrugged off the blast and struck the floor with its weapon. A shockwave threw soldiers in every direction. Elias rolled behind a console, pulling Karena down just in time. "Any bright ideas, Princess?" He shouted over the noise. Karena scanned the room. "The power conduits, if we overload them." Elias grinned. "Now you're thinking like a human." They moved fast. While Elias distracted the creature with fire, Karena rerouted energy to the chamber's core. The air crackled with static. "Now," she yelled. Elias ducked and shot the exposed conduit. Electricity surged through the hall, striking the Vorlith directly. It screamed, a horrible metallic sound, before collapsing in a cloud of smoke. The silence that followed felt almost unreal. Karena looked at him, chest heaving. "You're insane." "Probably," he said with a tired grin. But it worked. The heart of the facility, they didn't have long to celebrate. A report came through the comms. "Commander, more enemies breaching the west sector." "We can't hold." Elias clenched his jaw. Pull everyone back to the containment core. He turned to Karena. You have to finish the upload. The vaccine data needs to reach orbit. If we fall, at least the cure survives. I'm not leaving without you, she said firmly. You don't have a choice. Her eyes hardened. I always have a choice. Before he could argue, another explosion shook the base. The walls cracked. Flames erupted from the vents. Elias cursed. Go! I'll hold them. Karena grabbed his hand. Stop pretending you're alone in this, Elias. He froze. Her touch, her voice, it silenced the chaos around him. Then he nodded once. All right. Together then. The final stand, they reached the containment core, a circular chamber filled with blue light. In the center, a column of energy pulsed where the hybrid serum was being stored. Karena ran to the console and began uploading the data to the orbital satellite. Transmission sequence started, she called. 2 minutes. Elias set up a defense perimeter. He checked his rifle, almost empty. His sidearm, half a charge. 2 minutes, he muttered. We can do that. Then the Vorlith came. Dozens of them poured into the chamber, their armor reflecting the blue light. Elias fired nonstop, every shot precise, every movement disciplined. Karena rerouted turret systems to assist him, but there were too many. Elias, they're breaching, she shouted. Keep uploading, he yelled back. One of the Vorlith soldiers lunged toward the console. Karena drew a plasma blade from her belt, a ceremonial weapon never before used in combat. But now she fought. Her strikes were clumsy but fierce. The blade cut through the alien's chest, glowing hot. Elias turned in time to see her standing over the fallen enemy, panting, eyes blazing. He smiled. Didn't know you could fight, she smirked breathlessly. You humans aren't the only ones who adapt. The upload reached 90%. But then the main door exploded inward. The largest Vorlith yet stepped through, their leader, towering and covered in black armor etched with glowing red veins. You defy the Keepers, it thundered. You spread disease across the stars. Elias stood in front of Karena, raising his weapon. You call it disease. We call it life. The creature roared and fired a beam of energy straight at him. Elias dove aside, firing back. The blast hit the creature's chest, but it kept advancing. Karena, he shouted. Now's your chance, send it. Uploading complete, she cried. Signal sent to orbit. The Vorlith roared again, charging. Elias met it head-on, tackling it near the energy column. Sparks flew as they struggled, both landing heavy blows. The alien raised its weapon to strike, and Elias grabbed a fallen power cable, jamming it into the creature's chest. A blinding flash filled the room. The Vorlith screamed as energy tore through its body, collapsing into ash. Elias fell to one knee, gasping. Karena ran to him, grabbing his shoulders. Elias, stay with me. He opened his eyes weakly. Did it go through? Yes, she said, tears shining in her eyes. The cure's safe, he smiled faintly. Then it's worth it, she shook her head. Don't you dare say that, he laughed softly, even as pain rippled through him. You sound like my wife used to. Karena froze, then tightened her grip. Then listened to her words, not mine. You're not dying today. He looked at her, really looked at her as if seeing something he hadn't before. You remind me of her. Strong, stubborn, and beautiful. She blinked, stunned. Elias! But before she could answer, another explosion rocked the building. Reinforcements had arrived. Human and Terran ships from the upper fleet. The Vorlith were retreating. Elias exhaled slowly. Looks like we made it. Karena nodded, smiling through tears. You saved us all. He gave a tired smile. No, Princess. We saved each other. Aftermath hours later, the fires were out. The facility lay in ruins, but the data uplink was confirmed. The hybrid cure had been transmitted successfully to both Earth and the Terran Dominion. Elias sat on the edge of the recovery platform, his arm bandaged again. Karena stood beside him, looking at the sunrise through the cracked windows. The light of a new day spread over the scarred city. You should rest, she said softly. He smiled faintly. Can't, too much to rebuild. She turned toward him. You humans never stop fighting. He looked at her, eyes warm. Neither do you. The war was over, but the scars remained. Across the capital of Telrian, broken towers stood like silent bones against a pale sky. The fires were gone, yet the smell of smoke still lingered in the air. Princess Karena Turen walked through the ruined courtyard of the research facility, now half collapsed and half rebuilt. Around her, both Tiran engineers and human soldiers worked side by side, clearing debris and repairing power lines. For the first time in generations, two species that once distrusted each other were united not by politics, but by survival. And in the center of it all stood Commander Elias Ward. The rebuilding Elias was helping a group of Terran technicians lift a damaged power core when Karena approached. His uniform was torn, his arm still wrapped in bandages, but his energy never wavered. He gave quiet orders, smiled when the job was done, and then went straight to the next task. Karena stopped a few steps away. Watching him for a moment, it still amazed her. This human's stubborn will to keep going even when everything hurt. "You should rest," she said finally. Elias looked over his shoulder and grinned. "You said that yesterday. And you ignored me yesterday," she replied with a small smile. He wiped the sweat from his brow. "If I sit still too long, I'll remember how tired I am." Karena tilted her head. "You humans are strange," he laughed. "We get that a lot." She stepped closer. "Our scientists have confirmed it. The hybrid cure is working. It's stable." Elias froze for a moment, then exhaled a long breath. "You mean—" "Yes," she said softly. "No more plague. The first batch was given to our infants this morning. All survived. For a heartbeat, neither of them spoke. Then Elias smiled, a deep, genuine smile that reached his eyes. That's everything we fought for." Karena nodded slowly. "Yes, and everything we lost." Memories of fire later that night, the city was quiet. Elias sat on the steps outside the palace, looking up at the twin moons. His thoughts wandered, to the men he had lost, to the faces he would never see again. He didn't notice Karena until she sat beside him. She was dressed simply, her royal armor replaced by a plain silver robe. "You're far from your quarters, Commander," she said. "Couldn't sleep," he admitted. "Too many ghosts in this city." She followed his gaze to the stars. "You lost people close to you?" "Yeah," he said softly. "Good people, the kind who fight without hate." There was silence for a while. Only the wind whispered through the broken spires. Karena spoke again. "Do you regret coming here?" He shook his head. "No, I regret we didn't come sooner." She studied his face in the moonlight. The tired eyes, the scar that crossed his cheek, the quiet strength behind his calm. Humans aged faster than Terran, but in that moment Elias seemed timeless. "Your people call you heroes," she said. "On Vashara we call you something else." He glanced at her. "What's that?" "Fire bearers." "Those who bring light to dying worlds," he smiled faintly. "Sounds poetic." "It is," she said, "because it costs you everything." The council's decision, the next morning, the Tiran High Council gathered for the first time since the battle. The great chamber had been rebuilt with both human and Terran banners hanging side by side. Elias stood beside Karena as the elders entered. Elder Vareth spoke first. "The hybrid cure is a miracle. Humanity has given us hope beyond measure. We owe them gratitude," another elder frowned. "And yet, the humans remain among us. Their soldiers, their ships, their influence. Are we to surrender our sovereignty so easily?" Karena's eyes narrowed. "They are not conquerors. They are allies," the elder hissed. "You speak like one of them." She took a step forward, her voice cold and clear. "Perhaps that is why we survived, because one of them stood and fought when others fled." The chamber fell silent. Elias stayed still, saying nothing. He didn't need to. The look in Karena's eyes spoke for him. After a long moment, Elder Vareth said quietly, "Then it is decided. A permanent alliance between the Terran Dominion and the United Earth Federation." The room erupted in applause. Karena exhaled slowly. Elias looked at her and nodded. She returned the gesture, a silent promise that whatever came next, they would face it together. The Garden of Renewal weeks passed. The city healed, and life returned. The first Garden of Renewal bloomed outside the palace walls, green plants growing in Terran soil for the first time in decades. Humans and Terran worked together, planting, watering, laughing. Karena walked through the garden one evening, her fingers brushing against the leaves. She stopped when she saw Elias kneeling by a patch of flowers. "You're gardening now?" she asked, amused. He looked up, smiling. "Don't tell my old squad. They'd never let me live it down." She crouched beside him. What are these? Earth flowers, he said. We call them blue irises. My wife used to grow them. Her expression softened. You speak of her often. He nodded. She died years ago, before the plague. She would have liked this place. Karenna looked at the flowers, delicate, glowing faintly under Vashara's twin moons. You honor her well, he smiled gently. Maybe. Or maybe she's the one helping these things grow. For a while they tended the plants in silence. The air was warm, filled with the sound of quiet life. Karenna finally said, When I first met you, I hated humans. I thought you were arrogant and reckless. And now? He asked softly. She looked at him, her eyes steady. Now I know you're both of those things, but also brave and kind, and worth trusting, he chuckled. That's high praise from a princess. She smiled faintly. It's truth. The promise later that night, a message arrived from Earth. The Federation Council wanted Elias back. His mission was complete. His service honored. A ship would arrive within 3 days to take him home. Karenna received the message first. She stood in her chambers for a long time, staring at the glowing words. When Elias entered, she turned to him slowly. You're leaving, he nodded. Command wants a full report. And to rebuild our own worlds, she looked down. Of course. You have done what you came for. He noticed the faint sadness in her tone. You sound disappointed. She hesitated, then said quietly, I thought I'd grown used to your presence. I was wrong, Elias smiled gently. You'll manage without me, princess. You always do. Her voice trembled just slightly. Maybe, but not the same way. He stepped closer. You've changed, Karenna. The woman I met months ago would never have said that. She met his gaze. The woman you met months ago didn't understand humans. There was silence between them, the kind that said everything words couldn't. Finally, she asked softly, Will you come back? He looked at the stars outside the window. If the stars let me. Departure. 3 days later, the human transport ship Argus descended from orbit. Soldiers saluted, scientists waved goodbye, and the twin suns reflected off the silver hull. Karenna stood on the platform as Elias approached, wearing his polished uniform once again. Ready to go home? She asked. He nodded. As ready as anyone can be after all this, she smiled faintly. You'll find Earth much the same, maybe a little louder. He laughed. I'll miss the quiet here. They stood face to face. Around them, crews loaded the last supplies, engines warming. Karenna said softly, Elias Ward, I owe you more than I can ever repay. He shook his head. You owe me nothing. We both fought for the same thing. She reached into her robe and handed him a small crystal pendant glowing faintly blue. It's a shard from our moon, a symbol of renewal. Keep it so you'll never forget Vashara. He took it carefully. And if I return? Then you bring it back to me, she said with a small smile. He looked at her for a long moment. That's a promise. Then slowly he bowed, not as a soldier to a princess, but as a friend to an equal. Karenna returned the bow, her silver hair catching the sunlight. When he turned to board the ship, she whispered, barely loud enough for him to hear, Goodbye, Firebearer, Epilogue. The stars remember months later. Far from Vashara, the Argus sailed through deep space. Elias stood at the observation deck, holding the moon crystal in his hand. The stars shimmered beyond the glass, endless and bright. A young officer approached. Commander, message from Earth. They've begun using the hybrid cure on other colonies. It's working, Elias smiled. Good, keep it going. Every world deserves a chance. When the officer left, Elias looked out the window again. He thought of the silver towers of Telrian. He thought of Karenna's fierce eyes, her laughter, her pride, her courage.